Sony Kondo is coming up this week, which means there's either gonna be some camera, a lens, or a big Sony announcement. So before things get crazy, I wanna talk about some existing Sony cameras and the one that is inside this case, along with some of the options that I would consider switching to as someone who is primarily a Canon shooter. Now for me, the reasons that I would switch or purchase a Sony camera, or in this case, this is one that Sony has lent to me, the reasons that I would decide to get a Sony camera are probably different than the reasons that you might decide to get a Sony camera. For me, because I already have my Canon cameras, I'm gonna be looking at an option that maybe fills a gap in what I don't have access to. Or in other words, there's a lot of camera gear and lenses, the third-party lenses, that are made for Sony and other systems that aren't made for Canon. So my reason for getting this is maybe a little bit different than yours. But if you're starting out and you're looking at that budget entry-level option of a camera, maybe you're looking at an APS-C camera because all the lenses and the accessories are a little bit more affordable. Well, one of the options that I would consider is the Sony 6000 series. So the 6600, 6600, that is a great option if you need something for continuous video recording, like maybe you have a podcast set up, maybe you're looking to do stuff like this and you don't want any recording limits. Well, those types of cameras can typically record for about 3 hours. If you plug in a dummy battery or a different power source, you can usually run them a bit longer, but that's a great option even if you're looking to get into photography and you want something that is a solid option. Or recently I talked to someone who was interested in that camera for the reason of vlogging, because they wanted something that was a little bit higher end than their phone or maybe their little point and shoot camera. So that 6000 series is kind of in that sweet spot of not super entry level like some of their ZV cameras. Personally, I would avoid those cameras just because they're not gonna be the most ideal for photography. But if you're vlogging, the ZV series of cameras is great for that. Now, one step up from the 6600, that 6000 series, is gonna be something like your A7 IV. Now, last year when I was at Sony Kondo, I didn't use the A7 IV, but I did use the A7C2, which has the same sensor as the A7 IV. Sorry, sometimes my Sony nomenclature gets mixed up because I'm a Canon guy, I'm not a Sony guy. But the A7 IV is a great option for a working professional, someone who wants a full-size mirrorless body and a great sensor. Now, I know a lot of us are waiting for that A7 V, that next iteration. When is that coming out? I actually have no idea, but one of the cameras that I have here is very similar to the A7C2. This is the A7C-R, which has the same form factor as the A7C2, is a little bit more expensive because it uses a bigger 60 megapixel sensor. This actually has the same sensor that's in the A7R5, which is Sony's highest resolution camera, the highest resolution mirrorless camera that you can get. Now, you could say that that camera is equivalent to something like the R5 II that I'm recording on now. So if you're someone who tends to be a little bit more of a hybrid shooter where you do photo and video, you could get the A7C-R, you could get the A7C2, which is like this smaller form factor of a body. You could get the A7 IV, and I'll link all these down in the description below. If there's a Sony camera that you're using or that you've tried or that you're looking at, let me know which one that is, along with what lens you would use with that camera. But for you, the camera that you end up selecting, you're gonna go one of two ways. Either you're going to select it for the form factor, where you get all the buttons, all the dials, the latest flippy touchscreen, and the best viewfinder, or you might actually select the camera for the sensor. And in this case, I chose it for the sensor because I don't need a full-size mirrorless camera. I have that in my Canon R5 II and my Canon R5 and the other cameras that I'm using. But in my case, when I want to test something, I need something that has Sony's E mount. And so this guy, of course, is, oh my gosh, there's dust on it. I don't know if you can see it. It's got dust on the sensor. So one thing they do every year at Sony Kondo, however you want to say it, is they have their gear library with all of their latest cameras, all of their lenses. And so last year I was able to try a bunch. I actually tried the A9 III, which is really for that high-end sports or wildlife photographer. Probably not the camera for me because you're making some compromises with like ISO and noise performance, where in something like the A7CR or the A7R5, you're probably gonna have a little bit better noise performance if, you like to do landscapes or you like to do portraits. And so again, the question for you as someone who's deciding what Sony camera to get, you might go, well, I need the speed, so I don't need the ISO performance. I'm okay compromising on video quality because I'm more interested in photo. And one of the things I find with Sony cameras is that they are either geared more towards someone who's a photo shooter or a video shooter, where maybe you want a high resolution camera, so you're gonna get the A7R5, but you're not gonna shoot video with it. If you are a video shooter, then you're gonna get something like the A7S or the FX line. And that's actually another camera that I considered. I was thinking about maybe trying an FX3 for a few months. In this case, I don't know how long I'll be able to hold on to the A7CR for, but I do have a lens. And so the lens that you decide on will also be a factor of what it is that you want to shoot. In my case, the lens that I use on my Canon is my 15-35. And so I asked Sony to send out their 16-35 G Master 2. Which in my case should be able to shoot 90% of the content that I need while I'm away at Sony Kondo. Keep in mind, they do have other lenses there that I can borrow. I'm probably gonna do a couple portrait sessions and do some collabs with some other YouTubers. So if there is someone specific that you watch their channel and they shoot Sony, or they're also gonna be at Sony Kondo, comment down below who you want to see me collab with, because right now I'm doing a little bit of planning of some of the content I want to film while I'm there. I get asked quite a lot whether I would wholesale switch to Sony, and at this point, with all of the cameras and the lenses that are coming out, there's not really too much of a reason for me to switch, but there is a reason for me to supplement the gear that I already have, which are a lot of those reasons that I mentioned, where, now having access to this, I could test some Viltrox lenses, or I could test some third-party Sigma lenses that I wouldn't be able to otherwise. Now, there is a caveat with that, because when you are getting into cameras, you'll hear a lot of people comment online, well, Canon has no third-party options. And yes, that is true, but keep in mind who those third-party options are targeted towards. Both Canon, Sony, and all the other camera brands have great entry-level options, which if you're just getting started, you can get a variable aperture kit lens that you can throw onto your camera, or in my case, a lot of the lenses that I'll recommend are those STM the 24, the 35, the 50mm f1.8 primes, because those are all lenses that you can get for, $600 or less and still have great optical quality, still have autofocus and image stabilization. But it's not until you get into that mid tier of maybe like a prosumer. So if you're someone who is looking at slightly better lenses but doesn't have money for a G Master or an L series prime lens, then you're probably gonna be looking at third-party Sigma, Tamron lenses that have autofocus. And so for Canon, those options don't exist. And a lot of people will say, well, third party is the only way to go because I'm spending half of the price and getting the same thing. Not all of them are the best. Yes, you might be paying a third or half of the price, but quite often you're not getting quite as fast autofocus. There's no image stabilization in some cases, or the weather sealing just isn't the same. But in my case, now I can actually test them because I have a camera to test those types of lenses on. One more camera that I'll mention really quick because I tested it earlier this year is the Sony A1 Mark II. And if I had to switch completely from Canon to Sony, the first camera that I would end up buying would be the Sony A1 Mark II, because I think it is the most comparable to the Canon R5 Mark II. not fully. There are some benefits that the Sony has and some benefits that the Canon has, and the Sony is going to be a lot more expensive, but for a no compromise hybrid camera, the Canon R5 II, which is the one that I use, is probably the most equivalent to the Sony A1 Mark II. And I'd probably opt for like an FX3, like that might be another reason to switch, but apparently the rumors this week say Canon is supposed to come out with something, which So just a quick one today because I gotta head out to Sony Cando. My plane leaves very shortly. And so let me know who you think I should collab with and what Sony cameras you're interested in down in the comments. And until the next one, grab your camera, grab your lens, get out, and go shoot photos.